Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, the key to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the Manage Communications lesson here on the Project Management Prepcast. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. So in part 1 of this lesson, we did an overview of Manage Communications, and then we discussed the Communications Management Plan, the Work Performance Reports, Enterprise Environmental Factors, and Organizational Process Assets, which were our 4 inputs. In part 2, we delve into the tools and techniques and the outputs of the process, followed by a brief review of our entire lesson and finishing up with some sample exam questions and exam tips. Let's go. Here is our tools and techniques overview, and we have 5 of them. They are the communications technology, communications models, communications methods, information management systems, as well as performance reporting. And if you have a good memory or you simply open up your PMBOK guide, you will notice that there is a big overlap between the tools and techniques of plan communications management versus manage communications. It's easy to see that we have an overlap here. So let's take a look at these. So there is communications technology. Remember, communications technology can range from the more sophisticated types of technology, for example, telephone, voicemail, email, SMS or texting, voice over IP, video conferencing. All the technology could be fairly simple, like a conversation, a meeting, or a written document, for example. Another overlap: communication models. In terms of communication models, we saw the basic communications model, which explains how two parties, namely the sender and the receiver, transmit messages to each other. We will take a quick look at that again in a little while. Then we have communication methods. Recall how we discussed multi-directional or interactive communication and differentiated pull versus push communication in the lesson on plan communications management. And we will see here that there are 2 tools and techniques, mainly communications requirements analysis and meetings, that are only used when you plan communications management. These are not necessary, as after you're done with your analysis on communications requirements and resolved any issues and made decisions on communications, the communications management plan should reflect relevant resolutions and decisions in regards to how we communicate and the results of that analysis there. And then there are the 2 other tools and techniques which are more suitable for managed communications, but they are not part of planning communication. The first one is the information management system. We're likely to be familiar with this one, but we are introducing this tool and technique in this lesson, I believe, for the first time, actually. It's also used in control communications and control stakeholder engagement later on in other lessons. And then we have performance reporting. This is another new tool and technique which we will see again in separate lessons on procurement, as a matter of fact. So let's first look at the tools and techniques that are used in both plan communications management and manage communications. And then we'll look at the 2 that are not part of the other one. It's convenient that they correspond to the first 3 inputs that are listed in our PMBOK guide. So let's start at the top of our list here. So communications technology is first, and you want to select a communications technology that works. And as we have learned earlier, the technology does not have to be sophisticated. It could be simple, which means, hey, you can use the old tin can on a string method like this lady here. It'll be cheap, but will it be effective and meeting your communication needs and goals? Well, it's therefore not a surprise that cost is often a common consideration in choosing your communications technology. But you should be sure to take other factors into consideration to guide your communication choices. These factors we looked at in the plan communications management lesson. However, they bear repeating since needs can vary from project to project and, more importantly, even within the same project. So evaluate and re-evaluate the urgency, for information. Then you can decide whether you should send information by snail mail or special courier. Information sensitivity may mean that you encrypt any electronic communication or require that hard copies are sent by registered post or that it should be delivered in person. Also reevaluate the availability of technology and infrastructure to address the stakeholder needs. For example, some communication technologies require certain technology and infrastructure to be in place for both the receiver and the sender. If one party has a slow internet connection or low bandwidth, the message may be slow or simply incomprehensible. Then we also need to look at the ease of use of the technology. Do you remember how my brother had some difficulty in the beginning in sending his own emails when this technology first became available? That's something you need to consider, the ease of use for your stakeholders. And don't forget the project's environment, like culture, language, time zones, and member proximity to one another. These are just a few of the factors which may influence your communications technology choices. Remember the basic communications model that we discussed in our overview lesson? Well, let's review the model again here from a tools and techniques perspective, because you can use this model to identify and address any communication barriers that you encounter during the project. For example, if your team has a number of members whose primary language is not English, you can predict communications is going to be a challenge. What do you do? Well, you rely on constant feedback using this basic communications model. You ask them to give you their understanding of what you said. If their understanding is incorrect, then you stop the exchange, you repeat your message, you ask them again, elicit their response until you both agree on the meaning of the message. At first, this is a time-consuming approach, but in the long run, you actually save time and in the process build a better working relationship with your team. There are other models apart from this basic one. There is the interactive model, which takes into account that a sender can act as a receiver as well, and vice versa. The receiver can be the sender. Then there is the transactional model, which tries to explain how messages can be sent simultaneously by both parties, and that there is feedback which allows you to adjust your communication even as you are sending. For example, if you are presenting in a board meeting and one of the board members is scratching their head and looking confused, you know, even as you are speaking, you may not be getting your message across, and you have to explain a bit more. Communications can be tricky, however. For example, you can see in our photo here that everyone is giving us the thumbs up, which can be interpreted as gesturing okay. But it's quite possible that this gesture can be interpreted in different ways. We already talked about how, if possible, you should interact with your audience to clarify their understanding. We have also already covered how you should actively try to identify and manage for noise in your communication. Other models have a different perspective. They explicitly differentiate the realm of the sender and the realm of the receiver, how their context and background influences not only how senders form the message, but also how receivers filter and interpret as they accept and process the messages. Culture, background, education, even emotional states of mind all affect our filters as listeners. Next, we have to consider communication methods. Here we're talking about procedure, techniques, or ways of communicating. We need to evaluate communication needs to see if an interactive communication is in order. You can use meetings, teleconferences, or even video conferencing, or online collaboration tools, or online internet chat, instant messaging to exchange your information. If you cannot do it interactive, you can opt for push information to your audience or have them pull it for themselves. If you had a written article featuring your project, you might opt to push it by emailing it out to a distribution list, or you could post it on your organization's intranet site, where you hope that your audience will visit and read it for themselves. You could organize a meeting to explain project performance in the last quarter to your project team, or you could add that report on your project repository, where project team members can refer to it themselves. Note, you might even do a combination of any or all of these methods. For example, in the weekly status meeting, you might remind team members that you posted the report and where it is, but still let them get the information by themselves. If team members have questions about the report during the meeting itself, then you can discuss it in person directly. Remember, don't lose sight of the fact that you need to select the right method for your situation and your audience. And you can probably already think of a few situations on your own projects where you opted for one method over another one, where you decided to send a status report instead of just putting it onto your intranet because you noticed that it wasn't getting read if you just placed it there for people to read to themselves. Also consider the distance. Don't do a video conference for the people in the next building. Likewise, don't have an in-person status meeting for the team that works 8 hours away from you and has to travel to your location. And consider the time. If it is not warranted, you don't want your project team tied up in a 2-hour meeting instead of executing the actual work when perhaps an email would have been sufficient. Remember also that because a project manager spends 90% of his or her time communicating, you may agree that communication skills are an important skill to have. These skills are not specifically called out as a tool and technique in this process, but you still need to use your own personal communication skills effectively. And finally, remember that it is the responsibility of the sender to ensure that the message was received and understood correctly. Now let's talk about information management systems. And normally when you say information management systems, people immediately and automatically assume you're speaking about an automated system, an electronic system. However, it means more than just automated systems. It's about facilities, processes, and procedures that are used to collect, store, and distribute information between producers and consumers of information in physical or electronic format, as it is defined in the PMBOK Guides glossary. That is why you see a stack of papers in the image here on the slide. It is a reminder that information management systems can include a variety of physical and manual hard copy document systems in which you store letters, reports, memos, or press releases. But of course, information management systems can be, and nowadays usually and mostly are, electronic systems that use automated tools. There are technologies for communications like telephone, email, SMS, teleconferencing, you name it. And there are project management tools as well for storing data, for group online collaboration, for scheduling meetings, project report creation and distribution of these reports. Information management systems, as the name implies, helps you manage the information which you need in this process, as you have to manage all the information in order to communicate it more effectively. And now we're moving on to the final tool and technique here in Managed Communications, performance reporting. Just as we want to keep our focus on our stakeholders and audience in our choice of communication method, we also want to make sure that we use the right format and level of detail for performance reporting. If you are dealing with C-level executives who are usually looking for a synopsis but need to have enough information to make a management decision, you might opt for a report with a higher level format and less detail. If, however, you are dealing with auditors, analysts, or others who will seek and want to understand all the nitty-gritty little details, then you may need a more elaborate and detailed report. In terms of performance reporting, you would need to provide, for example, an analysis of past performance, current assessments and status of risks and issues, as well as work that has to be completed in the next period. And there could be other details which you need to consider, discuss and communicate in order to meet your stakeholders' informational needs, and all the time keeping your audience in mind and providing the level of detail that they seek. And in using performance reporting, you must also consider how your recipient thinks or prefers to receive their information, which falls under the heading of preferred communication styles. My former boss, for instance, is a linear thinker, and he preferred bullet lists. I, on the other hand, am sort of more abstract, and I prefer pictures and graphs. The right format grabs your stakeholders' attention, which is half the battle on the way to getting the support that you need. Now let us answer the question, what are effective ways to communicate? And by effective, I mean in terms of how well is your audience able to absorb and retain the information that you give them. So let's take a look at a few and see which ones are less effective and which ones are more effective. Of course, we begin with sending information, which is less effective than discussing the same information, say, in a status meeting. Next, we have receiving information. If you just receive the information, that is less effective than if you had to go out and research and create that information yourself. Reading information versus watching information. There's a big difference in regards to how much more effective watching is if it happens on a screen in front of you, and how much better you can retain and absorb the information. Or words only versus words and graphics. They say a picture paints 1,000 words, right? Certainly, graphics can enhance the words. Therefore, it's more effective to use words and graphics in combination. And of course, if you get words and graphics and then you add audio and video on top of that, well, that goes another way of becoming much, much more effective in regards to being a good communications tool. But this also takes us back full circle to the basic communications model. Remember the noise and filters that we discussed in that model? There can be actual noise or interruptions, as well as aspects such as language or culture that affect communications. Well, you should also take the communications model into account when selecting your method and technologies, and how you report performance and how you distribute information. Always ask yourself, which is the one available method to me that is the most effective? This is how you fine-tune your communications efforts. Let us move on to the outputs here in the managed communications process. We have 4 outputs and 3 of them are updates. The first is project communications, and then we have updates to the project management plan, updates to project documents, as well as updates to our organizational process assets. All right, everybody, listen up. Pay attention here. Yes, this is our main output of the process, the actual project communications, which includes, for example, performance reports, deliverable status, or costs that have been occurred on our project. The idea behind project communications is to make sure that the correct reports and their characteristics have been identified and are available for distribution. Project communication is influenced by the urgency and impact, the optimum method of delivery, and the level of confidentiality of the information that you need to have delivered. We already talked about this, but this is where the rubber meets the road. It is no longer conceptual. It is showtime. You have to gauge the urgency and impact and level of confidentiality of the information and make a decision about how to best communicate. Next, we have the updates to our project management plan. These are also important since the project management plan contains information about project baseline, communications management, and stakeholder management. So the updates based on current project performance are critical. Why are they critical? Well, stakeholders need to know about deviations from the performance measurement baseline or the approved plan. The outputs from managed communications informs them of these deviations. So for significant deviations, they can then establish course corrections. This is all part of management control. The project management plan updates contain the necessary feedback to trigger corrective actions so we can achieve our project goals. In regards to updates to our project documents, let's focus this example here to a gang of 3 specific project documents. First, the performance reports are updated to give an accurate reading on the project's progress as well as forecasts. They may also be updated if there is a remarkable change. Second, we have project funding requirements. They may need to be reduced or in many cases increased as you proceed with the project and go through progressive elaboration and learn more about the budget needs that you have. And then third and final, the issues log, documents and monitors matters that are under discussion or in dispute between stakeholders. By actively managing the log and keeping it up to date, stakeholders can see for themselves that the issues are being closed and that their issues and stakeholder concerns are being addressed. Updating these documents generates trust, confidence and stakeholder support. Keeping the issue log, project funding requirements and performance and forecast reports and any other relevant documents up to date is fundamental, and it's good communications management practice. It's not the only thing you have to do, but it goes a long way in bolstering your credibility with stakeholders. At this point, you might ask, now wait a minute, what about all the reports and notifications we send to and feedback we receive from stakeholders? Aren't they considered an output? And the answer is yes, they are. This is where the updates to the organizational process assets come in. When you send in your status report every Friday, then a processes and procedures update may be required because it turns out that your project has a clear process for internal information distribution which works, and so it is decided that this process must be employed by all other projects in your organization as well. And so an organizational guideline may need to be updated or created for your organizational process assets. Or at a minimum, this increases your organization's corporate knowledge base. The status report itself can be added as an organizational process asset, and it becomes part of your organization's records and historical files. And it's the same with other project reports, presentations, or project records that you produce in this way. The same also goes for press releases, which, let's say your project initiates an external information distribution process, which then becomes the model for the rest of the organization. Then you should update the organizational process assets. But there are also lessons learned documentation, which you may be gathering and updating as you are managing your communications. Even an email from a stakeholder with his or her feedback constitutes an organizational process asset update. And talking about emails, should we keep every email from stakeholders or even store all project-related information and correspondence for that matter? The answer to that question is already defined for you, and it is documented in one of the important project artifacts of this process here. Remember which one? Yes, of course, it is the Communications Management Plan. The Communications Management Plan talks about what you have to retain, what you have to destroy, and exactly how the corporate knowledge base will be filled with information that comes out of the communication from your project. As a whole, you should consider that timely and consistent attention to organizational process asset updates is another way to establish and maintain stakeholder involvement. This is not just for the duration of your current project, but for the long term. You also want their buy-in for future projects where you and a similar set of stakeholders may be involved. And that completes the material that we wanted to cover here on Manage Communications. Let's review. It's showtime, folks. When we manage communications, we execute on what we said we'd do in the Communications Management Plan. We answer the key question that is on every stakeholder's mind, which is, how's the project going? We use work performance reports to do performance reporting as we create project communications. So, when we manage communications, there is a lot of action. We gather information, create communications, use our communication skills, and distribute the information to the stakeholders using the appropriate communications method and technology, and are assisted by the information management systems that are available on our project. We keep the communications model in mind. We use not only the communications management plan, but also the enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets that we have at our disposal. Our main output are the project communications themselves, but they are also accompanied by other updates. We likely need to update the project management plan, project documents, and organizational process assets as part of the managed communications process. With that said, it's time to look at what you can expect under the managed communications process in terms of exam questions. And generally speaking, when we talk about PMP exam sample questions for communications, you will find situational questions that ask you to select the best form of how to communicate information to a given stakeholder. But at the same time, you must understand that communication is not a clear-cut science. Therefore, you have to use your experience and understand the communication concepts that are discussed in the PMBOK guide to find the best answer. Note that I didn't just say the correct answer, I said the best answer. All of them may look right, but you have to select the best answer for the particular situation that is described. Here is a sample for you. Which of the following is not an element of the basic communication model? Is it A, sender and receiver, B, message, C, noise, or is it D, the network? I'll give you a few seconds to think about this one here. Believe it or not, the most important thing for you to do as you are answering this and any other sample questions is to read the question correctly. And this is because you need to make sure that you see the word not in this question. If you saw the word not, then you will have picked the correct answer, which is D, the network. But if you had read over the word not, then you might have selected A, B, or C, which are all part of the communications model. But we're looking for the answer that is not part of that model. So network is correct because it is not part of the basic model. Network may be a term that you may associate with communications. For example, when you maintain your social network by talking to or using social media to keep in touch with others. Network also is used in the context of telecommunications when we're referring to multiple connections, as in a wide area network or a local area network. But to the basic communication model, only the first three choices here, A, B, and C, are actual elements. Before I conclude this lesson here on the managed communications process, I wanted to point out how straightforward project communications management can be. Remember what I said in the project communications management overview. I said if you know which part of the telephone to put to your ear, then you will pass project communications management on the exam. And there's a reason for this. We know that about 90% of your job as a project manager is centered on communications. Yes, communications takes up a lot of work. It is the most important part of your daily job, and it should be one of your top skills and priorities. Nevertheless, for many, it is the easiest part of the PMP exam because it involves soft skills, and soft skills are hard to test on a multiple choice exam. So make a real effort to improve your communication skills, not in order to necessarily just pass the PMP exam, but in order to be able to successfully manage your projects. And with that, we have come to the end of this lesson. Justine?
Write letters.
Until next time.